Well, good evening. Welcome to the Ent Center for the Arts at UCCS. My name is David Siegel. I'm the executive director here at the Ent Center. The UCCS Visiting Artists and Critics Series was founded in 2011 as a collaborative program of the UCCS Galleries of Contemporary Art, or GOCA, and the Visual Art and Art History programs in the Visual and Performing Arts Department here at UCCS. Over the past decade, the series has invited artists and scholars to UCCS to present public lectures and meet with students in class and workshop settings. The series brings artists and art critics of national and international significance here to campus with the goal to foster understanding and appreciation of contemporary art through dialogue and critical conversations. Tonight's lecture by Lauren Rosenthal McManus highlights a significant nationally recognized artist who we are so fortunate to welcome as part of the Female Emerging Artist Residency Program, which also goes by FEARS. We have lots of acronyms here at the Ent Center. The show is curated by Corey Dreith and the Visual and Performing Arts Department. Lauren's residency includes work with students to realize an exhibition in GOCA's downtown space, and I encourage you all to attend the First Friday opening of that show downtown in the gallery tomorrow evening, in addition to visiting the many other galleries downtown for First Friday. And while we have a moment of plugs, I would also encourage you to come back here to the Chapman Recital Hall for two events. Next Friday, November 11th, we have a Beethoven Sextet performance here on the stage. And then the following Monday, November 14th, Greg Deal, who has a show up in the campus gallery just down the hall, is doing a solo performance. I know many of you were at Greg's Visiting Artist and Critic Series lecture a few weeks ago, and so he'll be back Monday, November 14th, and would love to see your face again at that event. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the sponsors for this series: the National Endowment for the Arts and Colorado Creative Industries, the CU President's Fund for the Humanities, the Colorado Springs Lodging and Automobile Rental Tax, or LART, yet another acronym, and the UCCS Student Government Association, and the UCCS Visual and Performing Arts Department. I also want to say a special thanks to members of the GOCA Advisory Board and the GOCA PAC that make all of this work possible. So now, without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Kristen Galvin, Assistant Professor of Art and Art History, to introduce Lauren and this evening's program. Kristen.
Okay, thank you, David, for the kind introduction. So before I formally introduce Lauren, I wanted to quickly acknowledge those who made this residency possible. Dr. Glenn Whitehead, Chair of the Department of Visual and Performing Arts, Michaela Steen, Director of the Visual Resource Center, Nick Henning, Studio Tech for the Visual Arts Program, Lauren Butler, Work Study Student for the Visual Art Program, Hazel Key, UCCS alum and Lauren's Artist Assistant, Corey Dreith, Professor of Visual Art and Interim Academic Director of GOCA Downtown, and finally, GOCA Director Daisy McGowan, Lene Cravens, GOCA's Exhibition Events Manager, and the rest of the GOCA team. So for a bit more background on the Female Emerging Artist Residency Series, or FEARS, it was started in 2018 by the Visual Art and Art History programs. This residency addresses gender inequality in the arts by providing crucial professional opportunities for early to mid-career female identifying artists. While at UCCS for 1 week, residents hold an exhibition, interact with students in classes and critiques, and deliver a public talk, which we're about to enjoy tonight. FEARS has been generously funded by grants from the CU President's Fund for the Humanities, the Faculty Assembly for Women's Committee, and additional support from GOCA and the Department of Visual and Performing Arts. And we are very thrilled to have Lauren as our FEARS resident for 2022. Lauren comes to us all the way from New Jersey, and her work is perfect for FEARS and also for our department because her work is interdisciplinary. Demonstrating her commitment to community engagement, her residencies and awards include a Lower Delaware Wild and Scenic Grant and a McCall Center for Art and Innovation residency. For well over a decade, she has exhibited her work across the United States. A few highlights include shows at the Center for Emerging Visual Artists and Fairmount Water Works, and that's in Philadelphia, and the Rutledge Gallery at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Lauren's work focuses on the relationship between communities and their local watersheds. She draws upon cartography, art history, and ecology to reveal, explore, and re-envision our culture's complex relationship with fresh water. At GOCA, she will create a large, site-specific temporary wall drawing of the Fountain Creek watershed. This is achieved by using rocks and soil collected within its boundaries. By locating the stream within the context of a larger web of waterways that lead to the Mississippi, her exhibition provides the UCCS community with the opportunity for reflection, to carefully think about our connections to the waters, cultures, and landscapes that coexist in the Arkansas River watershed and beyond. So now it is my honor to invite Lauren to the stage, so please help me in welcoming her with a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much for that robust introduction. Also, thank you for naming the so many people who have helped me this week. It has been a whirlwind, and I couldn't have installed the exhibition without the help of so many of you. Some of you, many of you are out there in the audience now. Most of you I did not meet until this week, and some only within the last few hours. So thank you so much. It is an honor to be here, and I'm very grateful to be sharing my work with you in the exhibition and also tonight. I've structured this talk sort of like an artist statement. I'm going to talk about what I make, how I make it, and why I make it. I primarily make maps of watersheds. Some of them are quite large. In this image and the next, you'll see me up on a lift. This piece is a multimedia piece that's cut paper. It has 2 monitors embedded in it, and those monitors cycle so that they sometimes complete the map. Other times there are oral histories. Other times there are historical maps that sort of round out the picture of the urban streams that this map depicts in urban Charlotte, North Carolina. Some of the maps are really small. These are temporary tattoos that audience members were invited to take and wear to help them begin to think about and identify themselves with the watersheds in which they live. Some of the maps are sculptural. This is a map of the Delaware River watershed that's made with cut paper and an armature of wood. It's about 5 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide, and stands about 18 inches off the wall. And when a visitor comes up to it, it sort of is like coming up to another body. These are other pieces made with cut paper. They also are made the same way, with paper cut inside of a wooden armature, and they sit about 2 to 5 inches staggered off the wall to create shadows. These are of subbasins of the Hudson River watershed. These are topographic reliefs of the subbasins of the Delaware River watershed, which is my home watershed. They're individually cut from 300-pound watercolor paper and then put back together to simulate the kind of bowl in the landscape that a watershed is. I've noticed in my talks that there are sometimes people who don't know what a watershed is, so I'll just define it now. A watershed is an area of land, actually, and it's defined as an area of land where all of the water within its boundaries drains to a specific point on a stream. A watershed is defined by its ridge lines, so it is kind of like a bowl in the landscape, where all the water that falls from the sky, that rolls off the land, that goes through your drain pipes, ends up at a similar point. So everyone living within that boundary shares responsibility for that water. Some of the work is digital. This is a foundational piece of mine, and many of the plates from this atlas, it's a limited edition artist book, are shown in the exhibition here at GOCA. This piece reimagines the state boundaries of the United States based on watershed divides. It poses the question, what would our culture look like if we defined ourselves based on water? Some of the work, most of the work these days, utilizes rocks and soil collected on site. This piece is from a series of works of the Finger Lakes in New York, and all of the pigments that were used to make these watercolor drawings, these are works on paper, were collected on site. So rocks and soil, mostly shale up there, was collected on site, ground down into fine powder pigment, and then used to make these drawings. Some of these pigment works are really large in scale. This is one that was painted directly on the wall in the gallery in my watershed. This is the Middle Delaware River watershed. And then to the left of it in this installation, you can see some of those smaller drawings on paper framed in the space. This is a short video just to show you the process by which I make these wall drawings. It's a fairly time-consuming process, and in the end, it gets washed off the wall. So I'm going to kind of just let this run for a little bit, and then I'll probably fast forward a bit. But basically, you know, it gets masked off, and then the pigment is laid in. And then, let's see, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here, if I can. And then I actually use water to erase out all of the little streams that feed the main stem in a way that is sort of evocative of the way that water marks the landscape by eroding the soil. I'll just fast forward a little bit more here. And here you can see me just at the end of the exhibition washing it off of the wall. So these are temporary installations. This is a little sneak peek of the exhibition here, where you can see one of these wall drawings of your watershed, the Fountain Creek. Just to the left of it on the wall, a little bit further ahead, is the Arkansas River as it joins the Mississippi. So the Fountain Creek feeds the Arkansas, which then feeds the Mississippi. So all of these watersheds are connected to one another, and it sort of shows how there are smaller micro-communities, like the Fountain Creek watershed, that is also a part of a much larger community, which is the Mississippi watershed. This is a public piece, also fairly large, in a nature center in the Charlotte area of North Carolina that was made in a similar way, but it's not washed off the wall, it's permanent. And it serves as a wayfinding map for visitors to the nature center to orient themselves in a new way to their landscape. All of my work tries to do that, to ask you to think about where you are in space based on your ecological address rather than your street address. So a little bit more about the how. All of my work starts with data. This is just a screenshot of me working with an old software, ArcMap software, making digital elevation models into topographic lines. This is where I'm sort of composing an image. So I'm deciding which data to keep in the image and which not to use. You'll notice that my maps don't have labels, they don't have roads, they don't have most of the markers by which we usually orient ourselves in space. There's a great Georgia O'Keeffe quote. I'm probably not gonna say it exactly accurately, but it's something like, it is by selection, emphasis, and elimination that we can truly see. And that is what I'm doing in this process, is just deciding, picking out the key things that I'm going to keep in the composition and also what I'm going to leave out. The next part of my process is a sensory part of my process. This is absolutely my favorite part. It's just going out and getting in the landscape, getting down into streams. Oftentimes I'm just wearing waders and getting down in there, and collecting rocks and soil that I can use in my practice. This is some of the fodder of that process. So you can see on the upper left-hand corner little containers full of different colored rocks. On the upper right-hand corner, you can see back in my studio where I've laid out the clay soils to dry, some of the tools that I work with, a mortar and pestle, a sifter, and then also a heavier duty rock grinder. Some of you guys saw these in some demos that I did earlier this week. And then the last part of my process is a meditative process. It's really just being quiet by myself in my studio or in the gallery. Last night, I was there till pretty late at night, just tracing. A lot of it is just getting in a zone of doing repetitive actions and letting my mind wander, and also just noticing the patterns of nature, starting to think about water and the order of natural systems. I wanted to talk a little bit about early influences. As an undergraduate student, the beginnings of a practice often include imitation. And an early influence of mine was Merle Lederman-Ukeles. I don't know if many of you know her, but she's sort of a pioneering ecofeminist artist. She made herself the artist in residence at the New York City Department of Sanitation in the 70s. It was pretty unprecedented. It was not a paid position. She just decided that this was what she was going to do. In the upper left-hand corner, you see a piece that she did where she shook the hand of every sanitation worker in New York City, honoring them as people, as really important parts of our world, and really underappreciated in their, taking away our waste products. And so as an undergraduate, I went down to the Missouri Coalition for the Environment and asked them how I could be of service. And they asked me if I could be a spokestree for their campaign against a 10-lane highway across Creve Coeur Lake, which is one of the largest natural lakes in Missouri. And so I made this costume, I silk screened it and whatever, and I went to all their rallies and pickets and was on the news. And so you see me shaking hands with some residents at one of these events. The other piece of Merle's is where she outfitted a trash truck with mirrors so that you would see yourself in the trash. Because, we're all making it, right? This piece on the right is my piece, where I was walking along a stream in St. Louis, in University City, and noticed that there were a lot of shopping carts just strewn into the stream. So I dredged a bunch of them out, and I made them into trash cans and put them along the river. So these were kind of early forays. You can see that I obviously was interested in rivers and lakes, water, even way back then, and in activism. After undergraduate, I worked for several years for a river advocacy group called the Haw River Assembly. I organized an event that was a 3-week-long traveling environmental education initiative on the banks of the Haw River. And you can see that we used maps in teaching 4th graders about their local river systems. There were puppeteers and lots of creatives, and this was a really pivotal sort of foundational part of my becoming. It's not necessarily art-related, but it's an experience that really impacted me. And when I went back to graduate school, I always say the river came with me. I've always wanted to do community work. And more recently, in 2019, as a resident at McCall Center, I was able to start building some workshops that would allow community groups, young people, to engage in my process. So together, I worked with students. Everyone ended up making a piece of their local watershed that were all sewn together into a larger map of the watersheds, symbolizing how everyone is responsible in some part for the larger collective. I've done this also in my own hometown. So last year, I won a Delaware River Wild and Scenic Grant to be able to produce similar maps in Lambertville at the high school. And those maps were then displayed in several storefront windows around town. More recently, I've also started working with plant material. It seems like a logical next step. These are just some images of some early experimentation. What I want to leave you with is this. River systems look very similar to leaf structures, lung fibers, our vascular system. In looking at my maps, I hope that you might notice these connections and see that there is a sort of order and structure to the world and how we are a part of it and how we're also responsible for it. Thank you very much.